I am so grateful actually to have a greater sense of urgency about prioritizing her because we all take people for granted, whoever's in our life. And even though we all know we should be more intentional about the time we spend with them, I am so grateful that I like have that like bright light clarity right now that is my greatest, that this is the most important thing that I have going on. And I don't want to regret, as I did with my dad, I don't want to regret not having spent as much time with her as I can.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Medeiros.
And I'm Colleen Hungerford. And this is We're Doing This Right, right? Podcast for the whole woman, mind, body, soul, and business.
It's humor infused, as real as it gets, inspiring, and you'll walk away with real usable tools for life and business.
If you love what you're hearing, please share with a friend, subscribe so you'll never miss an episode, and rate and review whenever you listen.
So find your earbuds, lace up your walking shoes, or cozy up with a beverage of your choice. It's time to dig in.
Oh, and we are here, and we are doing it right. Right, Colleen? Are you doing it right?
I'm doing it right.
Okay,
Vivian is
great.
back. She was at camp for 2 weeks and it was the first time she's ever been away from me that long. And I picked her up this morning. So I'm just like, so.
How old is she, Colleen?
She's 10. Yeah. And she got to like sit in the front seat for the first time, like, because now she's big enough. And like, it was just me and her, and I let her sit in the front seat, and we went and got Starbucks, and like, it was just a cute hour and a half drive home. So I'm so happy that she's
I'm so looking forward to that age where we're buddies and it's less like, parenting. I mean, I know you still have to parent, but it's just a little bit less like on them for every like thing. They kind of know some of the things. Susie's back, but I have to do a quick callback before we get too far into this. Okay. Everybody, Colleen had a bat in her basement last episode.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And that same day, I had a bat in my house. Did it fly through the screen? I have no idea.
Sarah Armstrong told us what? It was like about like transformation.
Rebirth and transformation.
And I think we're just rebirthing.
What?
Being amazing. But we both had bats in our house on the same day.
Yeah. Wild, right?
That's Batty.
It is Batty. Speaking of Batty, shout out to Betty Batty.
Yes, Betty Batty.
All three of us in her newsletter. So Susie, Susie,
love us some Betty Batty.
Susie Adamson, welcome back to the pod. Tell us what you sent us today. We were so excited to get this announcement from you.
Yes, the amazing Betty Batty, who is a real estate agent extraordinaire with Compass in the Annapolis area, who is partners with our friend Kate Lazinski, who is part of our networking group.
But is
she a shout out? Yeah,
we have to. We'll come back to that.
Earmark that. Whole separate job. Yes. I got her agent newsletter today, which is so smart and takes a lot of work, and so kudos to her for that.
It's beautiful.
And she gave us all a shout out. She mentioned you guys, this podcast, as one of her should listen tos on her list. Which, yes, I echo that 100%. And then she also gave shout out to our upcoming workshop before the Compass retreat in November. So yay, Betty. Thank you.
Yay. Well, and Susie, what's your upcoming workshop? What is it? What's it called? Tell anybody who doesn't know.
It's called Business Essentials. We're going to rebrand because we're told that that's too boring a name, but whatever. It is what it is. I mean, it actually describes what it is, which is
matter of fact,
the essentials that you need to, we're very realistic in our branding. It is me, my dear friends, Jennifer Vick and Eliza Michaels, and we have consolidated a very intense 2-day workshop into a smaller, less intense 2-day workshop that will, actually it's a 1-day workshop, that's going to happen before the Charleston retreat for Compass agents, where we're going to talk about things that help you be less distracted and more focused. That's me. Things that will help you financially manage your business. That's Eliza. And then Jen's specialty is how to prepare yourself to pass on your business or to buy someone's business. She's a
Yeah.
genius at that. So
So
it's going to be
smart.
fun.
Amazing.
I love
Okay, well, let's tell a quick story about how um, you were telling me today that somebody should be a member of our CMC group. And I was like, wait, they are a member,
Isn't she
aren't
already?
they?
And then we
And I
both
was
had brain
like,
farts.
who? What? I missed this conversation.
yeah,
Tell me.
yes. Go, Susie.
I was saying Betty should be part of CMC, and she's partners with Kate. And Cheryl thought I was talking about Kate, and she was like, "Wait, isn't Kate already part of CMC?" I was like,
Oh
Very
my God.
I
confused.
was just I was just grateful that she didn't think I was crazy, but she was actually the one that was crazy.
Oh my God.
So we're
It's
all doing it
Friday.
right.
Yeah. It's Friday. That's what's happening. I think everybody's brain is fried and it's Friday. So
Yeah, I was telling Cheryl that I went to go see a orthopedic specialist today, which has been long overdue, as both of you know. I mean, I asked him if this was menopause related. He said it's just middle age. So yay for me, yay for all of us. Whatever middle age is, it's the pits. And so physically speaking. And so he was asking me all sorts of questions, and my answer to all of them was just like, I don't know. I don't remember. When did it start? I don't know. Which side? I don't know. Both, one, I don't know. What's your name? I don't know.
Diagnosing
Stop
a
asking me these
pop.
questions. Stop asking
oh
me
God.
questions.
Did they ask you when you
Just
last
bring a vet
period
in.
was? Because that's always somehow relevant.
Oh God. Thank God. But I do actually have to. Well, this is why I have systems. This is why I have processes, because my memory is for crap. And if I don't write things down, if I don't have a, record of things, I don't know. I don't remember anything.
Yeah. Cheryl, we're just looking
Thanks,
at
boob shot.
your boobs right now.
You're welcome. You're
Um,
welcome,
Looking for us.
everybody.
so what did the orthopedist say?
He
So
didn't know
I,
because
I,
he couldn't
well,
remember
no,
anything.
I had
I know.
actually what he did say. I had done x-rays for my hips and they did find mild osteoarthritis. It's very common for middle-aged women.
Yeah.
And thankfully, it's not like anything major. Basically, though, my problem is weak gluteal muscles.
Oh, okay.
I
So
have
do some
a
squats.
weak butt.
Yeah.
Right. So I have to do some PT, and all day long since my appointment, I've been clenching my butt.
Your butt. I mean, I've been working on my butt muscles too. That's like,
I'm doing it right now, in fact. Sitting here, I'm just clenching.
yeah.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
Good job.
I think
Nailed
I
it.
mean, like,
Yeah.
I think that's something that I think gets more emphasized now for women who are in their early 40s is to start strength training. But like that wasn't a thing 10 years ago to talk about
And I
strength.
have to say, people have been telling me since I turned 50 and before then, strength training, strength. And I'm like, I don't want to. And, it's also like strength training is a really broad category,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Nobody ever said to me, you need to like tighten your gluteal muscles or like strengthen your gluteal muscles. Like when I hear strength training, I think of like arms and legs. Like I don't think butt, you know?
Yeah.
But seriously, I have had some major hip issues in the past year, like to the point of debilitating pain. And so, all of you listening, mostly women, strengthen those butt muscles because it's no joke.
It's no joke. I mean, honestly, I started working with a trainer and started strength training in November. And we do mostly like hamstring glute because I was having hip pain and knee pain.
Mhm.
And that's mostly what we focus on. And it's made a huge difference. So, anyway, I'm glad you need to work
Well,
on it.
I'll be right there with you.
We'll all just do
Practicing my
some
butt clenches.
butt strengthening.
Okay, well, I'll just be strengthening my pelvic floor while you guys do
Good.
that, which actually is related to the
It's
core
all
and
related.
glutes. There was a lot of conversation around that too. So we're here. Okay,
Okay.
this is not what we're here to talk about, ladies and for gentlemen. So let's get started. We decided we're going to talk. Susie's got a topic that's near and dear to her heart,
Yeah.
and it's a little bit sad, but Susie's taking it as a blessing. So I'm going to
Yeah,
let you intro
totally.
it, Susie.
Yeah, so my dad had Parkinson's for many, many years, and he lived in Pennsylvania for the last probably decade of his life. He passed away 5 years ago. And, we would come down from New Jersey and visit, I don't know, maybe once a month, maybe once every other month. And of course, toward the end of his life, when we were clear that it was the end, I spent the last 2 weeks with him, which I'm grateful for. But to this day, I regret not having spent more time with him before that.
Mhm.
Not really, not making enough time because it's a choice. It's always a choice, right? Like
Sure.
I was so busy working. I was busy raising my kids. There are always reasons, we love to say how busy we are. And I was busy, but I should have made more time. And I regret that. And so when my younger son graduated from high school and was leaving for college last year, our family made the decision to move from New Jersey to Pennsylvania to be closer to my mom, who started living with my sister once my dad passed away. And she's 84 now. She was 83 last year, but she's 84. That's legit old. I mean, that's really
Yeah.
a long life.
Yeah.
And, at the time, reasonably healthy, no major issues, just the old lady things. And most recently, about a month and a half ago, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it seems that it has either spread or it's also in her lung. Not great news.
Yeah.
Having said that, she has a tremendous attitude. She feels very, the first month was rough just because we didn't know what the prognosis was exactly and what the treatment was going to be. So the unknown is always just no fun. That
Yeah.
that stage, that season is just like not a fun time. So that was a bummer. But once we kind of got to the place where she knew what was going on, which is immunotherapy, she's going to do that. She opted not to do chemo. And my sister and I are supportive of that because at this point, her intention is not to prolong her life. It's just to have the best possible quality of life for whatever days and months and weeks and years she has remaining.
Right.
She said to me yesterday she found out about someone who had survived with breast cancer for like 3 years or some period of time. And she's like, God, I hope that doesn't happen to me. I was like, yeah, I don't love that idea for you either. And, as much as it really, like, it's hard for me to even talk about without crying, I'm super sad about the idea of losing my mom. I was just saying to Cheryl, I am so grateful actually to have a greater sense of urgency about prioritizing her because we all take people for granted, whoever's in our life. And even though we all know we should be more intentional about the time we spend with them, I am so grateful that I like have that like bright light clarity right now that is my greatest, that this is the most important thing that I have going on. And I don't want to regret, as I did with my dad, I don't want to regret not having spent as much time with her as I can. So I was talking to a friend whose father was just diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I just said to her, here's some things I've learned, and here's some things I'm putting into practice. We, I kind of bullied him into going to the Grand Canyon with us the year before he died. He really didn't want to because he didn't feel physically capable. He wanted to go, but he didn't want to be a burden. And I'm
Yeah.
sure many people can relate to that sentiment from their parents or their loved ones. I'm and I just bullied him. I was like, no, you're not dead yet. You're going. And we forced him to go. And we did a helicopter ride so that he could see the Grand Canyon. We actually benefited from him being with us because we got to do like parts of the Grand Canyon that are only accessible to handicapped people,
Oh, wow.
where like buses go, but most cars aren't allowed to go. So we got closer to other areas. And he freaking loved it. He said on the helicopter ride, I've dreamed of this since I came to the United States in 74. And to be able to do that for him, obviously he's gone now. So like it wasn't for him so much as it was for the rest of us to have that memory with him.
Yeah.
And those pictures, and just for my kids who were teenagers then, they still remember how they were able to help him as well and be there for him. So take vacations, like do have experiences with people before they're gone. And even when they protest, because they will, if they're not completely selfish, they will feel bad, right? But make them, because it was really a beautiful experience. And then the other thing I learned is to record the stories. I wish I had done that with my dad, but I am doing that with my mom. And we did that with my mother-in-law before she passed. I had used this book, I think it's called Storyworth. It's this service I gave to them for Christmas, to my in-laws, where the service sends them a bunch of questions, and you can kind of edit the questions as well. But they're questions I wouldn't have thought of. Things like, what was your first vehicle? I just totally expected her to say like what car she had, but she said her tricycle. And she like dug up all these pictures, these old pictures, and scanned them and like made that part of her story. She really took the assignment seriously. And when she passed away a couple years ago, I print, they let you publish the book. Obviously, that's part of how they make their money. I made several copies, one for us, one for my sister-in-law, and then we had it out at the memorial, and people were able to see all these stories that she had recollected that told people these things that like otherwise she wouldn't have shared. Do you know, like who's going to talk about her first tricycle? But it was such a sweet story. And I got this thing in this deck of cards. They sell them on Amazon or whatever. It's called People Are Human. I think it's one of my many social media purchases. And this one particularly has Korean on one side and English on the other. So I can read it in Korean for myself. And then I hand the card to my mom. She can read it in Korean. And she has recounted stories I'd never heard. Like what was your best vacation or whatever. And it's just been really sweet. And I record them and share them with my sister. And we're just, I'm going to have that as memory. So record the stories as much as possible for you and for your children. So those are two things that come to mind. What have you guys done with your family? I know, Cheryl, you just recently had a loss in
Yeah,
your
we're
family.
visiting. I've got family that is unwell and will not be recovering from this. And I just spent time. This person who I don't know has gone completely public with what's going on yet. He doesn't want to, he took a trip that he wanted to take. We're just all taking turns going and spending time. He's always been private. He doesn't, he's comes and goes on his own schedule, and he's still wanting to do that. But when I was there on my last trip, we went over and he had some shows recorded about the gold country and gold mining in California near where we live here. And he wanted to watch that with me. And so that was nice to just
That is
sit.
nice.
And he's been that way my entire life. He sat down and forced us to watch Birds when we were kids. The Alfred Hitchcock movie. And we were terrified.
Oh, I thought you meant actual birds.
No, the terrifying movie that he made a bunch of like 8, 9,
That's
10 years old.
terrible.
Be terrified watching. And that was how he treated, his siblings growing up too, just scaring the shit out of him. So just spending time doing things he enjoys.
Yeah.
That
Just
actually
being
makes
near.
me think of, the other advice that as soon as my dad died, my cousin, her dad, my uncle, was ill to the point where they weren't sure if he was going to make it, but he was in Korea. And the three sisters weren't sure if they should go. And I said, go right now.
Yeah.
Go right now. And that is the advice I give to everybody. If you're not near your loved ones, just go. If you think of it, go. No, it's not financially feasible all the time, or it feels like a huge sacrifice. But I just think if you can make it happen somehow, you should do it, because it's much better to have spent the money. And I don't think you ever wish you hadn't,
You won't regret going.
Right.
You won't regret going.
but you will absolutely regret not going. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. We do that, a lot. Alex's grandpa turned 100 a week or two ago, and he's had a couple trips to the hospital for things, as you would think at 100 years old. And every time it happens, it's Alex, go, leave work and go.
Yep.
Work will wait. The money, who cares? Just
That's
go.
right.
Yeah.
So,
To add some levity, just so you know, I'm clenching my butt muscles right now too, just as I think of it.
Yeah.
mine are always clenched.
Well, it's all very timely. Cheryl was telling me, Susie, just about your mom and everything that was happening. And my dad came to live with us a year ago, and he's 82. He just turned 82. And he's very healthy right now, but he has stage 4 kidney disease. And he's been able to like manage that with exercise. Like the man walks 4 miles every day. It's insane. But he just kind of sat me down this past week and was like, my kidneys are not getting better. And, they don't know when I'll need to go on dialysis, but they want me to start looking at the dialysis options, but he doesn't want to do dialysis. And so he may choose to not do that, which then just like his kidneys don't work. So then it's just, like we don't know. And he had this goal. My nephew Zephyr is 16. He's got 2 more years of high school. And he promised my sister that he would go to Paris and be there for Zephyr's graduation. And he said he doesn't think he's going to make it. Which is like a weird reality because he's like fine, right? But it's to your point, because we had like this idea that we were going to take him to Paris and we were going to have this big trip. And he also, my sister wanted to take him to Denmark or something. And so I asked him, I was like, well, what about like the trip that you want to take, and he was just like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I can do that anymore. And I was like, okay, like, so it's just really sucky, but also like, it's such a weird, like a weird reality, like sitting here and like, he's fine. But like, he has always said to us that like, he doesn't want to live to be 100. Like he's not interested in that. He's very much like when my dog
understands.
What?
Susie understands. Susie doesn't want to live to be 100.
Oh yeah, I don't want to live. I don't want to live past 80.
Yeah, he's cool. Like he's very much like fine with dying. And so I was asked. He was kind of like, we had to sit down and have these conversations about like, he's like, well, I need to add you to my bank account, and we don't have any he doesn't have any medical directives or anything like that set up. And like, so we were kind of just like very matter of factly, which was great. Kind of like talking through some of these things. And, my husband's grandmother passed away a couple years ago, and she didn't have anything set up. And it was, and one of my very dear friends, her dad passed away very suddenly. He had a heart attack. And she had no access to anything. I mean, like they didn't even have access to his accounts to pay for his services and stuff like that. So I remember when I was young, my grandparents, his parents were very organized. Like my grandmother picked out the photo that she wanted at her memorial, like she had every thing planned out. And, I was very grateful for him to sit down and have that conversation with me. And it's funny because I'm the youngest of my 3 sisters, or the 3 of us that are sisters, but I'm the only one that probably could have sat and had that conversation with him without like making it a, my sister doesn't listen. So, but I haven't told her yet. And it's like it's just, to your point, Susie, when you were like, that trip was for you guys, I was asking him like, well, what do you want to do like for your service? Like, is there something that you would like us to do? And he's like, do whatever you want. That's not about me. That's about you. And I was like, okay, but like, could you give me some direction? Because I won't have to make these decisions.
Well, you bring up a few points, Colleen, that I think are really important. Number one, I was thinking as you're talking about him, not wanting to do dialysis. I think every person listening should read the book Being Mortal, if you haven't, by Atul Gawande, which I wish I had read before my mother-in-law passed away, because it talks a lot about how the medical profession, industry, whatever, doctors are also driven. They're driven to do no harm, but in doing no harm, they often do harm
Yeah.
because they're also trying to please the families and their sense of hope and keeping hope alive. But they often prescribe treatment that just prolongs the suffering when it's not necessary.
Yeah.
So I do think everyone should read that book, Being Mortal. The other thing you talked about, no matter how well or how young your parents are, have the conversation as soon as possible
Yeah.
about their matters. And I actually took the time recently to create a Google Doc of directions for my kids. Should something happen, like, here's my one password.
Yeah.
Like, what would they do? Do you know what I mean? Like, we have a will, but like, they would have no clue about where our mortgage is. Like, they don't like barely even understand what a mortgage is. Like, make sure that you're not screwing your kids and that you're not screwed by not having directions from your parents. And there are a lot of parents who don't want to talk about
Yes.
their eventual death, but it's going to happen. So, like, you need to say, just please, for my sake, can we have this conversation just clinically, matter of factly, when this happens, hopefully not for a long time, can we please make sure that it's not going to be a nightmare for me? And I've recently asked my mom, could you please make a list of your favorite hymns that you
Yeah.
want at your funeral? Like, when my dad died, she took care of like who to invite and the program. But when she passes away, we're not going to have the benefit of that. And so, I've asked her, just like, could you help me out? Just to your point, it's not going to be about her. She's going to be gone, but like, could you make it easier for us? Tell us, what we need, who do we need to call, and
Yeah.
what do we need to do? We don't even know who she knows. Like, thankfully, she just gave me this like tattered piece of paper with basically her phone book. It's just like double-sided sheet of paper that my dad had printed out once upon a time. That's like all water stained, and she asked me to make a copy and put in a new sleeve for her. And so now I have basically her phone book, so that when something happens, I'll at least be able to start the phone tree. I
Yeah.
think those matters are really important. Those conversations you should have early on. You just never know.
I've been really encouraging my husband to have those conversations with his parents, especially because there's 4 siblings. And I think that makes it challenging, right? When when you never know how somebody's going to respond to death and the grieving process and what that means. My in-laws are dealing with this now. My husband's grandfather passed away at 100, and there were 7 siblings. And there's been a lot of upset and a lot of family division about what to do with his assets and what to do with his stuff and how things are handled. And even though some things were outlined, like other things weren't, and people get weird about grief, right? And what that means.
Yeah.
And I think it also then sometimes falls on whoever the oldest is, right? And then they feel there's responsibility. My situation is reversed. But, I told this story. It's kind of funny, not funny. When I was pregnant with Vivian, so 11 years ago, my dad had a huge cyst on his liver. So much so that I was 4 months pregnant with Vivian, and he looked more pregnant than I did. And I was in San Francisco. He was living in San Francisco. So I took him to the ER. And I mean, it's been 11 years where I'm like, Dad, we need to have like a medical directive. Like, we need to have these things. And he wouldn't let me be in charge because I wasn't the oldest. And it was really interesting when I tell him this story afterwards. He's like, did I say that? I'm like, yeah, Dad, you did. And he's like, I must have been on morphine when I said that. That's crazy. And I'm like, But we were all in the hospital, and like, I had the most medical background of anybody of my siblings. And so my older sister was asking me, like, what's happening with dad? Is dad gonna die? I'm like, I don't know. I'm also like in San Francisco General with like the meth heads in the ER, like with open wounds, and I'm pregnant, and like dad's saying that I'm not in charge. So like, I cannot stress enough, like, how important these conversations are to have as soon as possible. I mean, it's just, it's so important, because I don't know what.
Yeah.
We all got to have a binder somewhere or a Word doc that's shared with our
Yes.
family with, yes, the name of your trust attorney. Hopefully everybody has a trust in place. So here's my 12 years in commercial insurance coming out, because one of the things we did was to urge our business owners to see estate planning and succession planning attorneys. So I got to sit in a million of these meetings. So you need to have a trust attorney. I don't care if you don't think you have enough assets to need a trust, you need a trust, because you can escape a lot of fees and probate and taxes by having that. And a trust is going to make your descendants, your beneficiaries' life easier. So a trust attorney. The trust attorney should be putting literally every asset you have, your bank accounts, your retirement accounts, everything into that trust so that your family has access to those things right away upon death. Also, not only death, but incapacitation. So let's say that you're in an accident and you no longer can think, or you get dementia and you no longer can, decide things for yourself. That gives people access to your things to be able to make decisions on your behalf right away. So an estate planning attorney can put all of those things in place for you. The healthcare directives. Do you want to stay on a ventilator? Do you want life support? You should get to be the one to make those decisions. We see on the news all the time these people that are on life support, and mom and like boyfriend girlfriend are fighting over who gets to decide if they stay, or spouse gets to decide who gets to decide if we are pulling the plug or not. And I mean, even with my husband, I've had to have very clear conversations. He is the type of man that would want to wait for a miracle, and I don't want to be there. I don't want to be on life support waiting for a miracle, not because I'm worried about what I would be feeling, because I would imagine I'd be a vegetable in that state and I am probably not feeling anything. I don't want to drag on their suffering waiting for the miracle, because in my personal opinion, we can't start grieving until it's over. It's like this purgatory in between, like the waiting. For me personally, the waiting is torture. And I just like, let's go rip the Band-Aid. Let's just start it. If we're not going to get better, let's just go.
Yeah.
Yes. So like
I've
I've had
said that to my husband too. Yeah. Like it's so important to me to be an organ donor.
yes.
If I am in a state where you have to decide, please do not compromise the ability for me to donate my organs.
Thank you.
Obviously people's priorities are different.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I have said, like, honey, if you can't make this decision, make sure I've told my kids from the time they were teenagers. If dad's not strong enough, one of you has to make sure that my organs are viable so that they can help somebody.
And I think some of these things change, and to your point, Cheryl, like having these, but also updating them too, right? Like,
anytime something major happens in your life, change it. And you write that trust as if you were to die tomorrow. This is so morbid, and I'm sorry, everybody, but you write the trust as if you were to die tomorrow. You make the decisions based on, if this were to happen tomorrow, these are the people that I want in place for these things. And it is very, very simple to update those documents. You call your attorney, you email your attorney and say, actually, right now, the biggest thing for us is our guardianship. Like, who's going to have our kids if something were to happen to us? Like, maybe today it's my mom, but maybe tomorrow my mom doesn't have the same amount of energy that I would want for someone raising my kids to have. So maybe tomorrow it's my sister, or maybe, it's really important for me that my kids stay in this community that they've been raised in. So now it's actually my friend, but my cousin's really good with money. So my cousin's going to manage the money. There's a different person for all of these jobs, and you designate all those people, and it's super important. And you can designate who gets access to, like, who can you be told by the doctor what's going on with you when you're in the hospital. Like, there's details about all of these things. Who, there's a slip of piece of paper in there, like who gets this ring. You can kind of designate those things as well. You could fill out information about like what song is really important for you at your funeral. You could go as far as you want to on these things. And I have a binder. My attorney has everything in their office. Also, an estate planning attorney, I hope they have a succession plan. I hope you're not hiring the one old man in your town who has no other attorney in his office, because what happens when you outlive him and he has no succession plan and now your files are just like in storage somewhere waiting for someone? That's something to consider when you're hiring an estate planning attorney. Do they have a succession plan themselves? Are there two attorneys on every deal? I think that's an important thing. My au pairs, I tell them where our binder is here at the house. It's like a morbid thing, but once they get to know us a little bit, I'm like, okay, so if Alex and I are ever in a car accident at the same time, the binder is right here in this cabinet, and this has all the information.
I want to go back to you saying, you've said twice now that this is morbid, and words are so important to me. And I want to call that out because I do think this is a sentiment that a lot of people have, that talking about our eventual death is morbid. But death is the only certainty. This is the only thing we know for sure is going to happen. It's not like we're imagining our demise. It is a certainty. It is going to happen at some point. And we all know horrible situations where it is untimely, right? That it comes before you expect it. So to me, I feel like, there are a lot of people who are afraid to talk about it or don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. I don't know. I just don't get that. Because
it's not an if, it is a when.
It is a when. It's a when. So like prepare for it now when you're clear of mind, when it is not an inevitability, hopefully, for many of us. It might be for some of our listeners. I hope not. But and then the second thing you mentioned is the jewelry. So important, because when my mother-in-law passed away, I really wanted this one necklace. And it was like super important. And of course, her daughter got it. Absolutely reasonable. But my mom, had these like particular pieces of jewelry that my sister and I were like, no, I'm getting that. No, I'm getting that. And we've had this conversation for like 10 years now. She took it. My sister took it in advance, proactively, so that I don't get it. And that's fine. She's done more. But I do think
proactively go back and take it out of her house.
But I'm just thinking like, I've never had that conversation with my kids. Like, who gets my wedding rings? How would they divide up these things?
I tell you, my dad's parents, my grandparents were like so on this. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because he was in the military. So this was something that was more. I will tell you that like when I was 12, my grandma was like, come over to the china cabinet and pick out the pieces you want. I'm going to put your name on. And I was like, okay. Yeah. So everybody came and we called out. And I have it, the pieces that I have them now.
Yeah.
He was so on it.
So much better than fighting over it afterwards, right?
Absolutely. I was like, no. Those are mine. Those are my cordial glasses. What am I doing with that? I have no idea. But when I was 12, I really thought they were cute. But I just like, what a great example she set of like, this is going to happen. We're going to handle this shit now. Like, we're just doing it. And it wasn't weird. And what's interesting is that like, my grandfather was Navy, and he was also a Mason. So he was, which is like, like a whole cool secret society thing. So there were very specific rules about their funeral setup, right? And then my grandmother was a Eastern Star, which is like the wives of the Masons. So she had a very specific funeral procedure set up as well. And I think, if you're very religious, there are that. But I think there's a lot of people now who don't have that. And that is where it becomes tricky as a child or a person who's responsible. Like for my dad, I'm like, I want to know what you want. And if you don't care, he's like, oh, I don't care. He's like, but I swear to God, do not call it a celebration of life. I will be so mad. And I was like, so you do care, right? Like,
that's hilarious.
You do. But it's interesting. Like, it's so important. And to your point, Susie, of like having these conversations in, like maybe in times where it's not distress, right? Or it's not, it's always going to be maybe emotional, but but not an emotional distress state of like feeling like impending
Yeah,
doom.
and also you mentioned, when you're grieving,
Yeah.
you're not of right mind to
No.
make these decisions. It's much like when I tell expecting parents, after you give birth, please, for the love of God, do not trust your feelings
No.
because your feelings are not the truth. They're not generally the truth anyway, but like, especially right after you give birth, your hormones are so out of whack.
Yeah.
You should not rely on those like post birth glasses that you're wearing and like sort of color everything with rage. For me, it was rage. And after my dad died, I definitely experienced grief brain. There was a season where my sister and I had a big fight while we were cleaning out our parents' house because we were both exhausted and grieving and so, yeah, it's not the time to be making any kind of decisions, and yet you have to make a lot of decisions.
Yeah.
Try to front end them if you can, so you're not like, arguing about the china cabinet,
Yeah.
the contents of the china cabinet while you're both, or where you and your siblings and all your loved ones are just in that state of emotional distress.
I had the gall the other day to ask my mother-in-law if everything was handled for her stuff at end of life, and
Good.
it is. And because it's coming on the tail of, like, we've had a lot of death in that on their side of the family, and
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, you've bought your, like, which cemetery do you want? Okay, you've bought your plot. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you also bought, like, did you buy the end of life, like, insurance? Yes, you bought that.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a life. Okay, like, tell me everything." So, because realistically, it's probably gonna be me.
Yeah.
Well, and that brings up another point too. Often it's the women. We're having this conversation right now. I just texted my husband while we're talking. We need to talk to your dad about a power of attorney and making sure his assets are in a trust. But he needs to have that conversation. I'm not
Yes.
going to have that. I mean, I've been
Right.
married for 24 years, but I'm not going to have that conversation with my father-in-law. I don't want him to be thinking like I'm planning for his death, but like my husband should certainly be having that conversation with him.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
think another interesting aspect to this is, and I don't know, it is like the people who don't have good relationships with their parents and how they have to deal with that. And like, estranged relationships with parents, like that is what it like that's a challenge,
Yeah.
and
Cheapest box you've got, please.
yeah, but then you're dealing like talk
Sorry.
about grief. Like I know like my mom and her dad had not a great relationship, but when he passed away, like that was still there were so many emotions and so many feelings, and there's still grief, and there's grief that manifests in a lot of different ways. And it also became like a challenging situation between the siblings, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
she's the oldest, but then like, wasn't really there because the situation was not great. And I think there's a lot, there's so much to this. And I think, there's not a lot we can do about those situations with the parent now, but not that I ever I think that I'm going to have an estranged relationship with my children, but I think as parents now, it's something so important when we continue to think about like that we just have this set up for our kids, that we just have the easy button, ready to
Mm-hmm.
go. Because like I just, very candidly, and I don't know if she still listens, but my mom and I have not talked in over a year. And like, I don't, she's old, like, and I don't know, that would be very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have
This makes me think of what you guys talked about in the last episode. Get professional help.
yeah,
Like if you are in a situation where certainly there's so many people who have not great relationships with their parents. No one has a perfect relationship with their parents, but like if you have like a situation where when they die,
yeah,
you're gonna have to deal with all this stuff and plus.
yeah.
So
Plus, plus, plus.
I mean, ideally, you get ahead of some of that stuff because it's going to happen, right? So I'm sorry, Colleen.
Just
All right, you guys. Well, come back next week and we'll talk about something a little lighter. I promise.
And
I
make
hope
sure
that
you
was
exercise
fun.
your gluteal muscles.
And make sure there's not a bat in your house, or maybe make sure there is a bat in your house because it's good luck information.
Yeah.
I'm not going to wish for that though. Just so you know, I wouldn't love that for me.
You wouldn't love that.
I didn't
really love it for me when we had to Davida and I had to go down to the basement and see if the bat was still there. We did not find it, by the way.
My cortisol levels spiked for a little bit while we were shooing it out of the house. The kitty found it.
We just
Thank
haven't gone in days. We just shut the door. Oh my God.
All right, Susie, thank you for coming back. We love you.
Thanks for having me. Love you
We'll
guys.
talk to you soon all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap. Thank you for joining us on this journey of laughter, life, and growth.
And remember, you're not alone on this path to success. We're right here with you every step of the way.
Please remember to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's conversation, we'd be thrilled if you would leave us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback means the world to us.
And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, family, and anyone who could use a good laugh and some practical insight into navigating the challenges and triumphs of our minds, body, soul, and business.
Remember, we're doing this right.